shortly after the presentation of the report of the Linden Commission of Inquiry, Chairman Lensley Wolf described the report as serving justice. On Plain Talk today, we discuss whether or not justice has in fact been done, the contents of the report, the winners and the losers. My guests are Mr. Mark Benschop and Mr. Lincoln Lewis, General Secretary of the TUC. Gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Has justice been done?
If, in terms of summing it up, with regards to the report, I don't think that justice has been done at all, period. And I have many reasons for outlining such. The first thing, I think it's a fraud upon the nation, not just the people of Linden, not just the victims, not just the relatives of the deceased, but it's a fraud perpetuated on this nation by this government, by bringing in their friends and lackeys, in my term, to say to us that these are the things that need to be implemented, when in fact we've been hearing the same thing over and over again. Chris, it's just a waste of taxpayers' monies, over $140 plus million.
But surely, I mean, the government, the opposition, all the political parties agreed on the composition of this commission of inquiry. The parliament voted the money. How can you call that a fraud?
Well, I don't think, before I give Lincoln a chance, I don't think that a majority of the opposition members agreed to that. I understand at the point in time that there was this bickering between the APNU and the Alliance for Change as to who should be part of the commission. The AFC held one viewpoint, and then their viewpoint was it should be comprised of persons with human rights background and other experts. My understanding is that the APNU leadership disagreed to that. The other issue is when you're going to have such a commission put in place, it is only fair that you have a cross-section of persons who would be involved in ensuring that that commission is well put together. In the case of this Linden Commission, it was put together by the PPP regime, primarily by Dr. Roger Luncheon, and one man who was selected by the opposition leader, David Granger, and that one man, Attorney at Law Joe Harmon, I think they are the ones who are responsible for this commission.
Mr. Lewis, let me get your perspective on that comment by you.
Let me say to you that, first of all, the comments made by the chairman of the commission, it is his perception. We need to look at it in two light. He says justice has been served. One is we need to look at the question of the recommendations that have been made by the commission, many of which appear before in other reports and recommendations from personal persons. And secondly, the issue of the compensation. When you look at I do not believe when you talk about the compensation, justice has been served, because I can't understand you can't understand for my life, during my life, you pay the same compensation for damage struck to a man's life. You know, that bothers me. I'm confused about that.
I accept that we've not had, maybe some of us have not had enough time to study this report. Mm-hmm. But I would like, the question of compensation was one element of the report. There are several other areas that the report was expected to serve. The question is, and Mr. Benschop raised the issue of the composition. Now, you had a retired Chief Justice of Jamaica, a former Chancellor of Ghana, a former Justice of Appeal of Guyana, a Queen's Counsel from Jamaica, a leading academic jurist from Trinidad and Tobago.
Because what happened here, we can't put ingredients in to bake bread and expect to get a cake. The composition of the commission in the first instance was bad, right? You hadn't... The report that we have got is from a number of jurists who sees the world in one light, whose training has taught them to just confine to the issue of laws and rules and do not see. In fact, what I want to say about this report, the jurists were looking, they behaved, the report reflects that they were standing in Mars, right? And Linden was orbiting in Venus. There's no nexus between what I'm saying.
Generalizations bother me.
What I mean?
Yeah,
what I mean?
generalization.
Yeah. Let me say to you this. There's no nexus between the report and what transpired in Linden. There's no background to this report that brings on board the social aspect, the social and cultural aspect of society. Laws are made, these laws that they refer to, the things they refer to, they have to be activated, they have to be applied in the society, and there's no reference to those type of things.
If I had to give a comment on this report myself, I would say it is a very poorly presented report. But in fairness to the Commission, they could only report on the submissions and the evidence that was brought before them.
Just let me just make this point to you. Let me make a point to you, Chris. I went to that commission and the evidence. The commissioner, the chairman, for instance, said to me, he don't want to hear about the history or the background of what transpired in Linden. He want to hear specifically what happened on the bridge, right? Which, in fact, what they did was to deny themselves an opportunity to understand what led to the people arriving on the bridge and what led to that behavior. The issue here, they did not look at the question of that in March of last year, of 2012. The government and the APNU sat down and they decided against what the Constitution said, and imposed a electricity hike on the people of Linden. If you had looked at those type of things,
the Constitution says you can't impose.
The Constitution said the people must be consulted, they must be party determining anything in the economic, social, and cultural life in the society.
You see,
and they were not consulted.
And this is a point I often have to make, that we have parliamentary democracy in Guyana as well.
Yeah.
Yes, you have the Constitution, Article 13 and 149C, which you're referring to.
Yeah.
But there's also parliamentary represent democracy. And it was during the budget debate.
But it wasn't agreed on.
It was done.
What I'm saying to you, it wasn't, they decided outside of Parliament that they're going to impose it.
And I think that's the problem we have in Guyana right now, where these politicians and both major parties, we'll leave aside the AFC for now, but both major parties, the leadership are of the view that they feel that they ought to impose their will upon the people. And that is what has happened in Linden, where the leadership of the APNU sat with the leadership of the PPP to decide what the future of Linden ought to be with regards to the electricity hike. We have heard some dilly-dallying reports from the APNU leadership that that was not the case. In my view, that it was the most deceitful sort of explanation emanating from the hierarchy of the APNU with regards to the electricity hike. The ordinary man and woman in Linden understand that there was indeed an agreement between the APNU and the PPP on that electricity hike. That's the genesis of the problem. With regards to the composition of the commission, we have a commission that was set up by the PPP and the APNU leadership. We have a bunch of lawyers there who are not part and parcel of the masses, the grassroots people. They do not understand the plight of the people. They do not understand the cry of the people, and therefore they were not concerned about ensuring that justice is meted out on behalf of the people. What we saw there, and what is in that infantile report, because I'm certain a nursery school child can come up with a better report than that, is these commissioners were bent on ensuring that they satisfied their paymasters. That is what it's about. The government paid them millions of dollars, over $150 million spent on this commission. 3/4 of that money went or divided between the commissioners. And I think they were just concerned about that. They saw it as another...
Are you certain about those figures?
I am saying, that's why I said approximately. But what I know for sure, though, is that the chairman of the commission was making close to $450 per hour.
I think that became public.
And I think that by itself should have been a concern for the opposition parties, the APNU and the AFC. The other issue, quickly, is you have a commission that was agreed to by the APNU and the PPP, and in that agreement, not a cent was set aside for the defense lawyers. But you have thousands of dollars going for the commissioners. You have, I'm talking about US dollars, thousands of US dollars going for the lawyers representing the government, but nothing for the defense lawyers. And I can't understand how Attorney at Law Joe Harmon, representing the interest, or supposedly the interest of the APNU, could not have seen that. Something is definitely wrong.
I'm sure there is a time and place for us to discuss issues like that. Let's get back to this report. The conclusion. It's just 4 bullet point conclusion. 1, the police were responsible for the shooting to death of the 3 persons. You accept that?
We didn't need to report millions of dollars for them to tell us that. We knew that.
No, but you can say you don't need someone to say somebody's guilty of murder. So you don't need to go to the court.
What they should have recommended were charges, criminal charges against the senior ranks on the ground on that day, and they have not done that. These guys in the commission are pussyfooting around with us. They have wasted our money, and it's time we stop being diplomatic with them.
You're in agreement with this conclusion?
It is that they are guilty. They are responsible for it. And let me say further, this report, when taken in totality, there are a lot of hidden things in it. For instance, this report says that the minister...
We'll get to there. Let's deal with these conclusions.
Yeah.
So you accept the first conclusion. The second conclusion, ASP Todd was somewhat reckless when he discharged 4 rounds of ammunition when there were hundreds of persons on the bridge and in the vicinity thereof.
Christopher Ram.
No, I don't consider it.
Todd was not somewhat reckless. Todd was reckless. There was sufficient evidence to substantiate that. Todd was reckless. In fact, he should have been charged already.
What they did is to massage the issue.
They then said, that's the second one, it's a matter of degree then. You're saying that he was reckless, not merely somewhat reckless.
Yeah.
The third one is that the discharge of ammunition by itself, by the police in the circumstances, by the ASP Todd, was justified having regard to the fact that the police were confronted by a very hostile crowd, and there was no clear intention on the part of the police to kill or cause injury to anyone. And it is in that context, in the context of that conclusion, that perhaps they said somewhat reckless.
No, I don't believe, I don't agree with it. You know why I don't agree with it? You can't tell me that it is reckless, and then at the same time tell me it was justified, you firing shots, right? When the same reporter said that the buckbeat or the bullets that they use is not for crowd, what you call it, control and these type of things, right? You're accepting in the report that. How can the conclusion not be consistent? with the content of the report.
With regards to what...
What I'm saying to you, that is ultra nonsense that is being concluded here.
With regards to what they have said there, that there was this threat. At no point in time any evidence was presented in at that commission, the hearing, that the crowd threatened the police. The fact is that the police received instructions from their political bosses to clear the bloody bridge and to clear the bridge by any means necessary. Again, I say this because there was no evidence that the crowd on the bridge, the peaceful protester, at any point in time threatened the lives of any policeman.
That is not correct, Mr. Not lives, but certainly the crowd was hostile. The report
the crowd defended themselves. They became agitated because there were elements within the police force who were there to agitate the crowd. Now, what the report is saying is that the shooting into the crowd, to some extent, was justifiable. That can never be truth, because you cannot justify excessive force. That is a clear example of excessive force used by Todd and his men.
Can I make a point here?
By all means.
The point I want to make to you is this. People were not born in buildings. People were not attacking the police. How this crowd was hostile?
But there was a breach of the permission for the holding of the protest.
But even the so-called breach of that commission does not justify.
No, can you let Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
The point is, let me point out to you. I do not see. That's why I'm saying that the commissioners were on Mars and the Linden was on Venus or something like that. What has happened here, what has happened in Linden on the 18th, is no different to what has happened, no different in the way Cheddy Jagan has handled things in this country. There's no different way that Burnham has handled it. It is no different to what the enslaved who were seeking their freedom. It was no different. It was no different to the indentured who were asking that their rights be respected. There was no different to what Gandhi did. There was no different to what Martin Luther King. So to tell me that you intend to, it is justifiable for you to turn guns on people because they stand up for their rights.
No,
that is
we accept that. But this is a different point. You're saying that the police have no.
I'm saying no. I'm saying no. I was standing behind them.
But Mr. Lewis,
let me just make this point.
Hold on. We're talking about this report now.
Yes.
We've gone beyond your own personal experience.
Well, I'm saying that the report is not correct.
I also want to make this clear that there were people on the bridge. At this time, a crowd of about 700 to 900 protesters were strung along the roadway leading to the bridge from the west of the bridge, and they were shouting at the police, in particular members of the TSU, whom they referred to as black ghost killers, murderers, and cursing them.
Is that justifiable to use excessive force?
No. The report goes on to say this, and I think this was in relation to a point you made, or perhaps Mr. Trotman, the question of what you should do when the Constitution is breached, when a right is breached. The justice of a cause seldom, if ever, justifies a breach of the Constitution. And certainly in this situation, we are of the view that whilst we empathize with the citizens, resorting to unlawful means could not have been condoned by the police.
Let me just make the point to you. You know, this old question here, what I believe they have not taken on board, and which the lawyers have argued. Well, I must commend the lawyers that represented the citizens and witnesses. What happened there is that they have not taken on board conflicting rights. What has happened here is that I do not believe that they have taken on board the cultural dynamics in the society and what may have led to this issue. Apart from that, the whole question of conflicting rights have not been addressed. In as much as the lawyers have, I know there have been a submission on the question of conflicting rights, and they have not sought to take that on board.
When you say conflicting, which rights?
The rights of my right as a citizen, if it's
breach the law?
Not to breach the law. The state has a responsibility to uphold the law. Those who are acting on behalf of the state, and when they have transgressed the people's rights, then you are telling me that you will use the state machinery to oppress me, but I have no.
No, Mr. Lewis, we have accepted, and we should move on from the point that the police have been held responsible.
I am not talking about the police in this case. I'm talking about this report.
We are talking.
I'm talking about the.
Hold on, let me finish, please. We are talking about permission having been given for a protest, for a march, which you have applied for, and you've been given it and granted it subject to conditions.
Just let me make this point. You don't ask for a march or a permission for a protest primarily in abstract. It is grounded in something. There's a reason why you ask for it. And in the first instance, the people's rights, the state people have used it.
I come to this. Unfortunately, you're putting me to have to remember every section of this report.
Yeah.
In his evidence in chief, Sharma Solomon admitted that he understood that the permission was granted subject to conditions. He was asked whether, based on his status as regional chairman, he was of the view that it was wrong to prevent the free movement of vehicles on the bridge. He agreed that it was wrong.
Well, Sharma Solomon, that is his view. But I, as a rights activist, I have a person who stand up in rights, who live in rights. I see it from a different prism. I see it that while the state has a right, I have a right too as a citizen.
To break the law?
Break the law? Well, the state break it in the first instance. If the state is using my tax dollars, the people's tax dollars to do that.
Shouting is not going to get us anywhere.
At the end of the day, Mr. Ram, my view is the people should never have sought permission for any protest or any march. The people should have had mass protest, shut the Linden tongue down until they get what they want. Let me give an example. And some people might say that I'm a little radical in my approach, but that's okay. That is how you deal with an oppressive regime. You don't go to an oppressive regime begging for anything or an oppressive arm of the regime. The police force is seen years now as an oppressive arm of this government. Let us take, for example, the people under quarantine at Albion, Wim, Hampshire, Nig, and those areas, Belvedere and so forth. They had serious problems with Albion Police Station, with certain members of the police force. They came out in their hundreds. They never sought permission for that protest.
Do two wrongs make a right?
No. I'm just saying that citizens have a right. I'm not saying that the people at Albion were wrong. I supported them, and I would support them again.
So you believe that any time someone feels an injustice... Let me finish my question, please, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah.
If you believe any time a group of citizens believe that their rights are being violated, that they have a right to go break the laws outside of permission, free movement of other people, etc., you think that's justifiable?
A mass protest can never be interpreted as breaking the law. Oftentimes, oppressors or dictators would want to say that these people are breaking the law. The Constitution gives the people the right to address concerns.
Constitution also gives the right of free movement.
Yeah.
But is not a right also? And whose right, Mr. Lewis talks about the primacy of rights? But there's the freedom of movement.
The situation with Linden, the people, a wrong was meted out to them. I am not of the view that they ought to go to the oppressors to say, look, permit me to go and march so that I can say I have a problem with that.
So you're saying that you should never seek police permission, just one march?
No, not under an oppressive system.
So you would blame the regional chairman for having done so? The
regional chairman did what he thought is in his best interest.
No, I'm saying you would blame him for having gone that.
He made that decision that it's in his best interest. I would have done differently.
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
You know, this whole question here is that when it comes to the question of people's rights, this issue occurred since in March last year. and that was 18th of June. Tell me, why is it that the state, the arms of the state, the president, the leader of the opposition, the parliament, recognizes the gravity of the situation? Nobody listened to the people of Linden. When this occurred, then we treat to lay blame. The blame has to be played straightly and squarely on the shoulder of those
That's
people.
the function of a
But
commission
this
of
report
inquiry.
did not do that.
Well, let's see what else the report has said. And it says what transpired on the bridge on July 18th could have been avoided if some of the influential community persons had intervened and advised the protesters to display due respect for the law.
Well, KD Knights has serious problems in Jamaica. And they understand that when the government of Jamaica raised gasoline or fuel to, I think, 1 or 2%, they took to the streets, they blocked the area, and the very KD Knights, who was part of the commission, this commission, supported such action. With regards to what the people of Linden did.
Evidence?
Oh yes.
That KD Knight was on that commission of inquiry? No,
he's
I'm
a
asking.
politician.
I know he's a politician, but to make a statement like
No, I'm
that...
saying that as a politician, he supported that. I'm not talking about what he did and his antics and his behavior on the commission over there in Jamaica. With regards to the people of Linden, again, they did the right thing. If the president of the day, Mr. Donald Ramotar, was statesman enough, he would have gone to Linden and addressed the concerns of the people. He never did that. If the opposition leader, Mr. David Granger, was concerned enough to represent his constituency, he would have reached in Linden and tried to ensure that the matter was resolved in a peaceful manner. He never did that. And so both leaders, the president and the leader of the opposition, ought to share responsibility for what occurred on the bridge.
There's another... You see, this report is in a way, it's cleverly done. You've got a few planned conclusions. It's also very critical of Ms. Vanessa Kissoon, Member of Parliament for the APNU. It says here that she spent quite a long time at the scene but did absolutely nothing to dissuade the protesters from breaking the law by blocking of the bridge.
As I made the point before, here again, what Vanessa Kissoon, what Sharma, what everybody did there is no different to what happens in slavery. And we have to take those things into consideration. And this report is abstract of the historical development that took place.
You see, we will have to get, if we pursue that line, into a deep kind of philosophical discussion of should we then throw away our constitution? Let us return to the culture that prevailed in 1763.
Just let me make the point to you. A constitution or laws are dead at its heart unless it is activated by a society. We cannot operate with a constitution or laws that are not grounded in the culture of the society. Culture is lived experience.
This government.
Right? And unless such time that we seek to address it in that light, we're not going to get anywhere. If we talk about the laws every day, and this is what put us in this problem. What governments have been doing in developing world to people, transgress people's rights. And every time people people resist. You know what we say? We say you're breaking the law. But they do not take on board that they break the law too by transgressing your rights.
Two wrongs make a right.
I am saying yes, it makes a right in this story. That's what I'm saying.
The citizens.
That is just hold mark. That I'm saying to you. That this question here about right. Rights are guided by universal principles. Even in this report, the report make recommendations.
Are you suggesting our constitution is not guided by universal principles?
I am saying that our people are not guided by principles.
Or politicians.
Our people. I'm saying to you, Chris, let me tell you something. As people argue about changing of this constitution, or to do certain things. If with the current constitutional form and laws, the government primarily that has a greater responsibility,
you know, Mr. Lewis,
don't respect it.
Mr. Lewis, and we're going to take another break. But if this report had gone favorable to you, you wouldn't have been.
This report is absent of some things. There are strengths in this report, that I will want to talk about.
But before you take the ad break, though, it is obvious from the beginning, from the inception, that this commission would never have gone in favor of the victims of Linden.
On Plain Talk today, we are discussing the Linden Commission of Inquiry, the report that was released a couple of days ago. We're talking with Mr. Mark Benschop and Mr. Lincoln Lewis. We'll now take an ad break. Welcome back to Plain Talk with Mr. Mark Benschop and Mr. Lincoln Lewis. We discuss the report into the disturbances in Linden, the Linden Commission of Inquiry. Now, I read here, there is no direct evidence that any of the deceased persons were actually shot by the police. I read as well that there's no evidence on the record, direct or circumstantial, which conclusively points to the fact that the 3 deceased were shot by members of the unit. This is the TSU. Neither is there any evidence that the deaths were caused by injuries retrieved from police-issued cartridges, numbers 4 and 6. How do you reconcile that with the finding that the police were responsible for the shooting to death?
It is somewhat hopscotch. What they did was to place a responsibility on the police, but they are saying that the police is not guilty for the death of these people, for the shooting of these people. They are responsible, but they're not guilty. They didn't participate in the shooting, but they have further said that the evidence that is supplied from the evidence gleaned that it's only the police that fire shots there. So it is.
That explains the word responsible.
Yeah.
As opposed to the actual shooting. Mr. Benschop?
I have a problem again with the report because these guys are playing games with the people. They don't want to offend their paymasters. Maybe that's why they exonerated the controversial Minister of Home Affairs, Clement Rohi. It is clear that it was the police responsible for the shooting. This report is saying, look, there was no evidence that any other person was seen there with firearms other than the police. There is no evidence which was led in the commission hearing that other persons fired shots on that day other than the police. When you take those 2 circumstances and you married them, the only conclusion that you would come with is that the police shot and killed those innocent protesters. And this is what the commission should have been saying, that the senior police ranks on the ground should have been charged by now for murdering those innocent protesters. I'm upset with that report. I find it to be hogwash. And so anything, Mr. Ram, anything you say from that report, it will deem hostile on my part, because it's a waste of taxpayers' money. I have no respect for those.
Except you knew you were coming on this program to discuss this report.
Yes,
I knew yourself had a program on Friday evening on the same report which you do, but you want to hear nothing
and
about.
I accepted your invitation only because I wanted the nation to know that this report and also the Linden Commission of Inquiry was a fraud perpetuated on this nation by the PPP and supported by the leadership of the APNU.
One of the things I noticed about this report as well, questions being asked rather than answers being supplied. On an issue, it says, this begs the question, if 00 buckshot cartridges were not being used by the police since 2005, or for over 20 years, which couldn't have been from over 2005. How is it that the police were able to provide a sample of the 00 cartridge to Dr. Robinson? Does this not show that the police still have such ammunition in stock?
Well, this report, while it's written, there are while I have concerns about the report, there are some elements. It questions a number of areas. It's a damning report on the police force, right? And it's a damning report while it says that, look, the minister is not directly involved in giving no evidence that the minister is directly involved in giving instructions on the 18th of July. Giving instruction to the police on the 18th of July. What it says that the supervisory arms of the police force is a serious problem that he has responsibility for. And not only the police force, the police service authority, what do you call it?
Complaints authority.
Complaints authority. You know what it says about that too? It says that, look, this thing is headed by reputable person.
Well, one of the commission, the chairman of that
was there. But while he was there, they said that the evidence revealed that this commission has been requesting independent investigators and staff to carry out the work, and it was not supplied with that.
Mightn't it not have been a good question to ask what is that chairman of the Police Complaints Authority doing if he can't carry out the functions of the authority?
Well, that was the question of the APNU representative, Mr. Joe Harmon. He agreed to that. And that is why I'm saying that the APNU ought to share responsibility for the composition of this commission. The other thing, Mr. Ram, that we want to talk about is the fact that I cannot understand how this farce of a report could conclude, the commission could conclude that Mr. Rohi is not responsible.
We'll get there.
Good.
I am not mentioning pages because the copy that I have does not have a page, but it does say Dr. Robinson, this is the expert, the forensic expert, mentioned that the police provided him with 3 rounds of ammunition, 2 of which are in current use, and the 3rd had not been in use since 2005. They were numbers 4, 6, and 00 cartridges. It goes on to say, the report, there is no evidence on the record, direct or circumstantial, which conclusively points to the fact that the 3 deceased were shot by members of the unit. Neither is there any evidence that the deaths were caused by injuries received from police-used cartridges 4 and 6. Now, if the police were responsible, does this suggest that the police have some unaccounted for cartridges that it uses on particular occasions?
Is it unaccounted, you put it? Let me say to you, when you read this report, Chris, and you go through a number of areas, what it tells you is the level of shenanigans that is involved. The question here that when the report made a point that the bullets that I believe it was that was referred to that were fired. They were bullets that can be lethal. They can kill people into this before that was fired by thought. I'm saying to you that what we have here is that the police is a massive cover-up by the police. And what the commission should have been doing is to come out with more, and not detail, but specifics on this issue, rather than the circuitous route that they went, not wanting to mash the toes of persons.
And that is very sad. When you have a commission that ought to be independent, who are more concerned about not wanting to mash the toes of maybe the hierarchy of the police force, maybe their paymasters as well, that in itself becomes questionable. And therefore, we could, from the inception, conclude that the people, again, I'm sticking to this line, that the people of Linden, the victims, were never from the inception entertained of receiving any justice from this commission.
But you know, before we move from this, this report virtually said that while there's no evidence that the police force is controlled by government or party, right? There's no evidence, but they have said that the perception in the society makes it that way. In fact, what we write, and they call for certain things to be done, and in so doing, what they're saying is that the police force is a Tonton Macoute of the PPP government. That's what
those
they're
are
saying.
your words, not their words.
I am saying that is what they're saying.
Now, Rodney, in his evidence, police officer, in answer to Mr. Hughes, Nigel Hughes, said he was not under threat, but was preparing for any situation. And then later it said Rodney was the report now said Rodney was the only rank seen loading his shotgun in a location. He said he did so about 2:20 p.m. around the area of the bridge because he felt threatened. Is there an inconsistency?
Very inconsistent.
The police force is run by a bunch of officers who oftentimes issue inconsistent reports. I don't know why people, under these circumstances, what has happened in Linden, they would want to cover up with the cartridges, with the mixing up of the witnesses and so forth, that the police witnesses, and nothing that they say there should be believed, because we know from the beginning that they would have been covering up themselves. Todd, I am certain Todd didn't fire off just 4 rounds. The people were shot at, lots of people were injured, 3 persons died, unfortunately, and I think the police want to cover up. The commission has aided and abetted them in doing so.
In this report, we read that the Commissioner of Police, Acting Commissioner of Police, testified that from intelligence sources, he had information the day before the march that some persons other than police would have guns. The report went on, in this regard, since there was information that protesters would have been armed, would it not have been prudent for some snipers to have been put in place to be on the lookout in order to infiltrate the crowd? Did the Commissioner of Police come out good? Forget all the rules and the structure. Here he's saying they had information and yet went ahead and allowed the march to continue.
But that becomes questionable. That a police commissioner could say that they have information, intelligence, that persons will be there with armed, probably to the teeth, with guns and so forth. I mean, that's ridiculous. But again, Chris, I'm not surprised that it's coming from the acting commissioner of police. Remember, he said the other day that he has to defend his boss, and that's exactly what he's doing.
The commissioner?
I am. This thing is conflicting. I don't understand why the commissioner did not put systems in place if he had all this intelligence to protect this, to avoid these things from happening. If they had intelligence, they know where these may come with arms. Why they didn't pull those people in? Why they didn't incarcerate them for maybe at 24 hours? Seek to arrest this thing. Why they didn't do that? Well, you see, what we're doing here is that we are looking at while their cause, while they're saying that this existed, they didn't act on that. What we do now is that we are looking at the effect rather than dealing with the cause of it.
It says as well that there is no evidence that any police officer was shot at. Do you accept that finding by the commission?
We know that from the beginning. There was nobody armed. Those were peaceful protesters. A lot of them were women, elderly folks, they were children, the people were aggrieved. They weren't there with guns or missiles to hurt anybody.
Mr. Benschop, you know about agent provocateur, you know that this is all possible.
Yeah, the PPP is
nobody was
masters at that.
Or that anyone else, but some mischief maker, not necessarily PPP.
Yes. The mischief makers came after the people were shot upon. And those were the mischief makers who, in my opinion, were responsible for the setting of fire of those buildings deliberately.
Can I tell you something?
In order to make the protesters look bad. And the PPP, in my opinion, They're the ones responsible for setting that up.
Can I make a point to you?
By all means, you'll be making them all along.
Apart from what is said there, they are right in that report that shots were not fired on the police. They are right on that. Everybody knows that. The question here, as Mark referred to the what you call the burning and the arson and what have you. You know what the security people of thing, and they should have called them. Of NISIL, not NISIL, the Linden Secretariat made it very clear that the building at Linden, all the material, nearly all the material in the building, maps and everything were removed from there and placed into an office in the alumina plant a couple of days before the protest, which gives indication that they were prepared to burn the building and blame it on somebody.
And that's exactly
just the same way as how when the Ministry of Housing was burnt, it was in '97.
Yeah.
When the Ministry of Housing on Homestretch Avenue they was burnt, they had all the data.
That's not part of the findings of this report.
No, but I'm saying to you, I'm making the nexus of how the politicians behave. They burn buildings and to blame people.
Well, let
me come back to the report.
Yes, you do slip in your ones, Lincoln.
And quite justifiably too. Yeah.
I think the viewers can decide that. The evidence revealed that police were being attacked by stones, missiles, and other objects, and in the circumstances, the resort to tear gas proved ineffective. The next step was the resort to shotguns. ASP Todd stated his intention was to scare protesters to leave the bridge.
By shooting into a crowd with women, pregnant women, little kids, and old people.
But Mr. Benschop, you read the report. You know it says that he did it by firing into the ground to take the velocity off in order to avoid injuries to the protesters.
That's hogwash. Todd and others fired into the crowd. They were instructed by their political bosses to do just that.
We cannot lose.
I don't know what is your evidence for making a statement like that. When we've had a commission of inquiry, I think you monitored.
Yeah, I was there a few days. Yeah.
And to make statements that are quite frankly unsupported by what is here.
Well, what I'm saying, I'm going with the history of the Guyana Police Force.
No, but we're discussing the particular events and we're discussing.
Your viewers out there, Mr. Ram, know very well that no policeman, no police officer in this Guyana Police Force is going to just shoot on the ground to scare people off. The police officer on the ground or the policeman fired deliberately into the crowd. So let's not beat around the bush that they fired in order to ease
as I said,
no.
That's your view. I'm talking about this report. No. And I'm hoping, if this is your position, whichever, your own self, and you're quite a one-man group, then you, and I say that as a compliment. you do better than many established groups, and I wouldn't want to name any. Then you should do a rebuttal to this report. That's our obligation.
Yeah.
Not just to make statements at random, but to make an informed rebuttal point by point of this report.
Chris, let me make this point on it. You know what you've said there, and here again, I don't want to question the competence of the persons who have written the report, but I'm saying to you that they have seen through different lenses than I am seeing it, right? The point that is raised here it conflicts with some other areas of this report, because this is a man who's saying that, look, this is what I've done, but this is a man who said, look, I was given instructions to clear the bridge at all costs before nightfall, right? So what is being done there? Let me just. And if you can permit me, let me just link what I'm saying here to another section of this report. You know what it says? It talks about the management of the police force, and it said the management of the police force is centralized upward, right? And it talks about an absence of the people who are making the decision of having a feel of what is taking place on the ground. And they made special reference to this. Todd was supposed to be the man who will be making the decision of what the next move going to be. But he had to call somebody on the telephone who is not there. And that person makes the decision. Right? It questions now, it brings into question how the police force is being managed. And these are concerns.
I don't think the architects or authors of this report are necessarily in disagreement with you. They've called.
That's what they said.
They've called for reform of the police force, though they didn't mention, unbelievably, all the many studies and recommendations that have been done, costing tens of millions of dollars. The question of the minister. The minister, in fact, said that it was not, he did not agree that it was his duty to give directions to the police, to tell them how to deal with the situation in Linden, etc. He said, as part of the police operations, as a minister, he was concerned with policy. What's wrong with that?
Well, that statement coming from the controversial minister, Clement Rohi, why should the nation believe that? We know that there is sufficient evidence that this current minister gets involved, and more than involved, in police matters in this country. For him to say what he's saying in that report is, again, another farce and a blatant lie. I don't believe anything this minister, this controversial minister of Home Affairs, has to say. He is protecting his butt, so to speak.
But phone records were made available, Mr. Benschop, as to communication. The one thing we have now is we can trace.
And the evidence also in at the hearing said that these senior ranks, Hicken, and especially Hicken, was in touch with the Minister of Home Affairs more than he was in touch with the Commissioner of Police. So who is the minister fooling?
That is not true. The report does not say that. The report
I'm talking about the evidence presented, but the report wouldn't say that.
Can I make a quick point on this? The minister is right that he's responsible for policy. And the minister is what it fell short of is to say that he has a responsibility to make sure that the policy is being implemented. And secondly, if the policies that you have are that what guides the police force, when in fact all the reports over recent time have been damning, and this one here has been damning on the administration of the police force, then in fact what the minister is saying, what the minister has said there, he is guilty. He is guilty of poor performance as a minister. Because the policies, the operation has to be consistent with the policies.
All right, let's move on to, because I know you want to deal with this issue of compensation. Do you agree with the Commission's conclusion that it would be absurd to make a recommendation for the government of Guyana to pay itself and disallowing or denying any compensation to NISL?
Yes, I believe so. And I believe so because the government, this thing has its genesis in the behavior of the government. You have created a situation. The consequences of it, you want somebody else to bear it.
But they know very well that it's a government entity. It makes no sense you say, pay a government's entity. So, again, I question that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to have come up with such a statement. Oh, you're going to pay yourself.
Now, what about these, the compensation for the relatives of Shemroy Bouye, Alan Lewis, and Ron Somerset, the persons who died on that day?
I believe that what was absent is that I don't know if they have checked with persons or agency that is competent on the issue of compensation. I believe that what has happened here is that they have operated in a very abstract manner, or how they feel about something. These things were compensation was allotted to these things, because I cannot understand you giving a man compensating for a man's life equivalent to what a truck has been. These are little things, and I don't know we can move forward beyond this. What we have to look for, if the parties, in fact, one of the things that the report said, that in these recommendations, they hope they have the political will to deal with some of these things.
Well, not many strong recommendations have been made.
Not strong recommendation, but they say if you have the political will, this gives an opening to the.
All right, the compensation.
I think it's heartless on the part of the Commission to have allotted $1 million for an 18-year-old and $3 million apiece for the other two gentlemen that got slaughtered by members of the police force. It shows then that the members of the Commission have absolutely...
Again, you say slaughtered. That was not the findings of the Commission.
It is my opinion.
They said they were responsible for.
Yeah, there's no other evidence to suggest otherwise. And so we've got to be very fair. And Mr. Ram, we've got to stop with this diplomacy. We've got to be straight up. Call it as it is. The police killed those
Yes, but
people.
at least we must also be honest.
Well, I'm being honest that the police were the ones responsible for the deaths.
The report says that. The report says, are we talking here?
But they slaughtered them.
The question I asked Mr. Benschop is the adequacy of the compensation. That's what
I've said that they're heartless. The commission, the commissioners are heartless to have allocated such meager amount to those.
Well, okay. What about the compensation to the persons who, according to the Commission, were taking part in and conducting themselves outside of the legal framework?
I don't believe that there's anything that was done there.
Yes, there was. Yes.
That's what I said. What I'm saying to you, that even if they deem it to be illegal, you ask the question: does one right, one wrong, another wrong?
No, we talk about the adequacy now.
No. I'm saying to you that there is nothing that is illegal in this sense.
The adequacy across
so the
board
question here of the money, that compensation, it should have been addressed by the competent.
Do you see? And I know you've been in touch with the attorney representing the deceased. Do you see civil action coming out of this? We've got just a few seconds left.
There ought to be more than civil action. For the compensation, yes, civil action. For the others, criminal action.
I am glad that I'm given an opportunity to say. I believe that personally, I will go the lawyers to go, and I just want to say thanks to all of them for what they have done. I've had a good day today when I sit down between the host of Plain Talk and the host of Straight Up.
On Plain Talk this evening, we've been discussing the Commission of Inquiry's report into the deaths of 3 persons, and indeed the whole issue of what took place in Linden on the 18th of July 2012. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Benschop, thank you very much for appearing on the program. Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. See you next week, when I hope we will be dealing with the banning of calypsos as an art form and as censorship in Guyana. Until then.
God don't sleep.